Welcome everybody to the introducing the Panthera X3 Snoring and Sleep Apnea Treatment Appliance webinar. It is being presented today by Andrea Klie, Regional Sales Director in Ontario for Panthera Dental. Take it away, Andres.
Good evening, everyone. It's really nice to be here. And for some of you, maybe not the first time that I've spoken to you, but certainly won't be the last. But anyway, I'm really happy to be here today and to introduce you to a very, very exciting new product that we launched a couple of weeks ago. And we'll go through it. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll have some questions. But for sure, it's going to be a really, really exciting evening. So just a little bit of background to who we are. Panthera Dental, we're a company based in Quebec City. For those of you that have been to Canada, Quebec City is a beautiful, beautiful city. We also have subsidiaries in the US and in Europe. At Panthera Dental, we're leaders in custom-made dental solutions. So we have different departments. We have the implant, we have we have the Panthera Dental, and then of course we have Panthera Sleep, where we do the mandibular advancement devices. So we have a dedicated sleep division. We really have cutting edge in CAD/CAM and 3D printing technology. We are recognized as a 4.0 manufacturing company, which means we are fully robotic, fully digitized. So everything is 4.0 manufactured, and everything we do is with a proprietary software. So that's a little bit about our company. If you ever get to Quebec City, it's really worth the trip. Please come and visit us and come and see what we do. So without further ado, let's look at what we're looking at tonight. It's the Panthera X3, and here it is. So for those of you that have done sleep appliances before, you may be familiar with the design. It's a dorsal appliance. Really quite a simple composition of the appliance. Comprises of an upper splint, a lower splint, and a housing which houses the titration clip and the triangle. So your dorsal on the lower. So that's just everything in a nutshell, but we're going to go into the details and what everything, how everything works. So in the introduction of the X3, so this is the next dorsal thin appliance. It is 100% nylon. It really sets itself apart from all the other dorsal appliances out on the market. It is 100% nylon. For those of you who have worked with us before, who know us, this is our second generation appliance now. We do have our first generation appliance, which is the Dsad, also a nylon appliance, and we figured that why not have two appliances to really cover the needs of every single clinician and patient. So we now offer both of our appliances, but the newest one, of course, the X3 is the really exciting new addition to this. The X3, it's a full CAD/CAM appliance. The nature of the nylon allows us to make it very small. It's lightweight. Very comfortable for the patient. It's custom made. It's maximum comfort, and the comfort really leads to patient compliance. And the nature of the material, the nylon, makes it extremely bruxing resistant. So for those of you that have worked with our products before, with our Dsad, will know that the nylon really stands up to some very, very severe bruxing patients. Okay, a little bit about the material and the design. As I mentioned, the appliance is made from a natural polyamide, a nylon type 12 natural polyamide. It is extremely biocompatible. For those of you who are familiar with the USP, United States Pharmacopoeia, it's a level 6 certified. What does that mean? It is the highest level of biocompatibility within the plastic family. So we are registered with a level 6 certification. The design of the appliance, you will notice on all of the designs, we don't have any premature contact on the posterior regions, which really protects the T&J. And the retention is obtained from a natural undercut of the teeth. So there are no clasps. All the retention is attained through the undercut, the natural undercut, both on the teeth and interproximally from the teeth. So characteristics. Yes, it is equivalent to the Somnomed, the Somnod Infusion and the Classic. So for those of you that have worked with dorsal fin appliances, you will notice that the designs are very, very similar. However, the X3 does stand apart from the other appliances. There are no metal components in this appliance. There are absolutely no metal components in the X3. We do not have any clasps for retention on our appliance, and there are no expansion screws. So we will go a little bit into the way that these appliances are titrated, but no expansion screws. And we use the natural undercut for retention. And you'll notice that our dorsal is a 20 degree, a plus 20 degree dorsal appliance. The characteristics, in short, it's easy, precise, and secure clip-on titration. So you'll notice just on the upper, just forward of the little box, there is a little clip that gets changed, and we're able to titrate the appliance either going backwards or forwards. What is really great about this type of titration mechanism, there are no tools required. So it's a really, really simple process of taking out the clip, replacing it, changing it out for either higher or lower titration, so either moving forward or moving back, and we can move back 1 millimeter. So this appliance allows us to move forward and back in our titration. And as I mentioned already, the triangle is at a 20 degrees, so it allows for mouth opening, allows for drinking and talking. So just to look a little bit at the titration mechanism, we are going to look at this a little bit closer, but just an overview of it is, so it's a very simple and easy titration mechanism. You'll notice that we have 0 millimeter set at the delivery, and we're able to go back 1 millimeter in ½ millimeter increments and titrate forward up to 5 millimeter in ½ millimeter increments. So the titration process on the X3 is done in changing the clip. So every case that you receive, you are going to receive a full sheet of clips. And the sheet of clips comprises of your delivery is at 0, so the 0 point, and then we have the possibility to move back in ½ millimeter increments to -1. And we also have the possibility to go from 0 and move forward in ½ millimeter increments all the way up to 5 millimeters. So there's a range of 0, -1 to +5, and there are 13 clips on each tray. So changing these clips out is really so simple. That's one of the beauties of this appliance, the simplicity of it. It's the efficacy, all the benefits, but just the fact that it's such an easy appliance to titrate. It really is one of the simplest appliances to titrate. So I've put together a little video just to show you how easy it is to change the clips. So again, no tools are required. And you can see the little clip just forward of the box. So to remove the clip, quite simple, using a nail or your fingers, just pry it out. And it's a really, really easy clip to remove. And you'll notice there are little undercuts. So it's a really secure mechanism that it doesn't dislodge and the patient won't swallow it. Do that on both sides. So once you've removed the clips from your upper appliance, you'll now go back to your, and you'll notice that to clean, it's really easy. So if you ever need to clean within the appliance, it's really easy. Everything is open. So as I mentioned already, your case comes with rods starting at 0. This is your starting point on the appliance, and I have the possibility to move back 1 millimeter and forward in ½ millimeter increments all the way up to 5 millimeters. So what you're going to do is you're going to choose whatever millimeter you're going to go in ½ millimeter increments, remove that from your sheet, and there's one for the left, one for the right. Once I've chosen the correct clips, I'm going to now put them back in. And there's only really one way of putting them in. So there's no way you can mix them up. It's a matter of putting them back into the housing and just a little push in, and there's a little audible click and snap, and you know it's in, and that's it. And you do the same on both sides. And as you can see, just push it in and it snaps in, and it is solid. It's not going to come out until you really wedge it out with your nails. And now you have titrated your appliance. So really, guys, it's that simple. As I said, no tools required. It's very predictable. You know exactly how much you're trading the appliance by. They're in 0.5 millimeter increments, 1 millimeter. So it's a very, very predictable titration. Okay, so a question we often get asked, so bearing in mind, the X3 is a new appliance for us, but we do have our first generation appliance, which is the Dsad. So question is, what is the difference between the two appliances? And there are a few very distinct differences, and I'm going to go through some of them now. The similarity is they're both nylon appliances. So they both fall into the same category of material. So they're both USP level 6 certified. So the material is exactly the same. So one of the biggest differences in the appliances is the force, how we titrate. So how are we pushing that mandible forward, or how are we moving that mandible forward? So the X3 is a push mechanism, and the Dsad is a pull or traction mechanism. The difference in that is that as a traction mechanism, it promotes mouth closing. So it doesn't allow the jaw to drop. So for patients who are mouth breathers, where I want to keep the jaws closed, the Dsad, the traction on the Dsad is the better option to go with, or a preferred option. The push mechanism in the Panthera X3, for example, it allows the patient to open the mandible. The mandible drops, so it does allow the patient to open their mouth. So again, you know, if you have a patient who's a mouth breather, but there are, of course, there are options to prevent that, but just to give you an overview of what the major differences between the two appliances are. The major difference is the traction force. The one is a push and the other one is a pull. We're going to go more into the actual bands and the designs of the appliance, because we do have a huge range of designs that you can choose from. But just to give you a brief outline, what is recommended. So these are not hard, fast core rules. These are just recommendations. So bear in mind, and as we go through it, you will see that we do offer a wide range of options for you to choose from. But our recommended upper band, and we'll go through the different terminology, the upper band, lower band, and the plateaus, but the recommended upper band is the minimized risk of upper anterior teeth movement. So for the X3, we recommend an upper lingual band, whereas for the Dsad, we recommend an upper labial band. Again, these are not rules, hardcore rules, these are recommendations, but of course, depending on your treatment philosophy, your patient situation, these can be changed. These are really just recommendations. So these are just to minimize the risk of upper anterior tooth movement. And we have the same recommendation in the lower. So to minimize risk of lower anterior teeth movement, on the X3, we recommend a lower labial band or rigid band. What does that mean? It's a labial band with an incisal wrap and a half coverage on the lingual of the lower. On the Dsad, we go the other way around. We do a lower lingual band and a rigid or a half wrap on the lower. So it's lingual band, incisal wrap, and half over to the labial side. Again, these are recommendations. They're not hardcore rules. So the other difference between the two appliances, as we've already looked at the titration mechanism of the X3. So on the X3, there are clips. They're in increments of 0.5 millimeter. And we have a titration range of -1 from 0 to -1 to +5. 13 clips on the tray. And the Dsad, we have a wider range of titration. So depending on what your titration range is, this will also determine which appliance you're going to go for. So you'll see with the Dsad, we have a much higher range, titration range. We have 20 rods. So our titration range on the Dsad is from 18 millimeters up to 36 millimeters, the rod length. So we have a huge range of titration on the Dsad. Another big difference in the two appliances, the X3, the titration is done through the clips. We have a box in the first and second molar region on the upper, and on the Dsad, we have the upper rod mechanism is anchored on the upper in the canine region, and in the lower, it's in the molar region. So bear this in mind when we start looking at retention in these appliances. If you can imagine, we have the X3, which is unhinged. They are separate appliances, and the Dsad are hinged, so they are joined together. So indications for these appliances. What are indications for patient conditions? Because of the design of the Dsad, the way that the triangulation is set on the mandible, it's very difficult to make that appliance for patients with crossbites, posterior crossbites. So for patients with, what are the recommendations for X3? Patients with posterior crossbites, absent or fragile lower molars, or compromised retention in lower posterior. Why? The type of mechanism, they are separate appliances, whereas the Dsad are hinged. So the tendency on the Dsad, because they hinged, when the patient opens their mouth, the hinge on the lower appliance, it tends to want to pull the appliance off the arch. So as the rods get shorter, the force becomes bigger, and the patient, as they open their mouth, the tendency is to pull the appliance off the arch. So what's important with the Dsad is we need really, really good retention in the lower molar region. So for patients who are maybe missing some teeth in the posterior lower region, or have shorter teeth, more conical teeth, not as great retention in the lower as we should have with the Dsad. So the indication for that type of patient would be the X3. And on the other side, the Dsad, the tendency to open or mouth, as I mentioned already, open mouth breathing, the way that the titration or the titration is done, the X3 is a push mechanism. It leads to mouth opening, whereas the Dsad is a traction, so it promotes mouth closing. So where I have a patient who has a tendency to open their mouth or mouth breathers, then the Dsad would probably be the better indicated appliance to use for this patient. The other difference between the two appliances is the TMJ sensitivity or pain, where what we mean by that is the way that we titrate. Again, the one is a push, the other one is a traction. There is less force on the TMJ on a traction appliance. So for patients that have TMJ sensitivity, the Dsad would probably be a better indicated appliance for that patient. Large tongue, Dsad better indicated, and absent or fragile upper molars and absent or fragile lower canines, because remember again, in this appliance, we rely less on retention in the anterior on the lower, more in the posterior region. So appliance selection. These are just recommendations, as I mentioned before. The appliance selection, whether you choose the X3 or the Dsad, there are numerous factors, and I mean, we're not here to tell you one is better than the other, one is more indicated for a patient than another. So it really comes down to certain criteria. Appliance selection varies according to personal experience. So some of you have been trained on different philosophies. You have different treatment planning, different treatment philosophies, different treatment planning for different patients. I mean, every patient is different. What is really great now, though, is that you have within one family of nylon appliance, you now have one appliance or two appliances that pretty much cover every scenario that you could imagine, that you can possibly imagine. So you're not limited just to one appliance now, okay? The X3 treatment planning requirement, it's a propulsion capacity of the patient versus starting. So the X3 has a shorter range of titration. We only have 1 millimeter back and 5 millimeter forward. So we have to be aware of this when we look at the range of titration we want to do. This becomes a critical factor in choosing which appliance we want to do. So bear that in mind when you look at the patient and you see their range of motion and where you want to start the patient in their titration. This plays a big factor in the choosing of the appliance as well. So moving on, we look at, so in the terminology that we use, and you'll see that in the prescription, there's really two components to these appliances. The one are the bands. And when we refer to the bands, what we refer to are the structures that join the left and the right component of the appliance. In the upper left and right, in the lower left and right. So it's the component that joins the two quadrants. And in the Plateaus, we look at the contact point between the upper and the lower appliance. Where do the upper and the lower appliances meet? And you'll see we have in our bands, we have numerous options. We have buccal, full bands, we have half lingual, half buccal, lingual, full. So we really have a huge selection of combinations that when you put them together, your combinations are really endless. And then on the Plateaus, we have the possibility to also put different combinations together. You can have a full upper contact, upper lateral, anterior contact, and we're going to go through some of them and indications for each of them as we move along. So just to show you, just to explain the terminology when we talk about bands and Plateaus, what do we mean by bands and Plateaus? So how do I order Panthera X3? The prescription is very, very simple and it's very self-explanatory. So you'll see in section 1, and this is really, I would say, the most important part to fill in and the information that we need to start the appliance. So we have an option for 2 types of bite registration. You're going to supply one of 2 bite registrations. The first one is to provide a bite registration in maximum protrusion. So we're going to take the patient to maximum protrusion. You're going to send us either a model or a digital file with a maximum protrusion. In our manufacturing, in our software, what we're going to do is we're going to take that maximum protrusion and we're going to take the bite back to 60% of your indicated or your provided maximum protrusion. So when you get the appliance back, as you saw on the delivered appliance, the clip is going to be at 0, 0. That 0, 0 is 60% of your maximum protrusion. The alternative to that is, the second option is to provide a bite in the desired protrusion. So you as a doctor will decide where you would like to start that patient. So you'll get the patient to do a few protrusive movements, find out where the comfortable spot is for the patient, and you take the bite in that position and you're going to indicate that this is the desired protrusion I want to start the appliance at. In this case, we're going to start the appliance at that desired protrusion. What you have to be aware of and take into consideration is with the X3, you only have 5 millimeter range of forward protrusion. So if you provide us with the desired protrusion and you have, let's say, a range of 6 millimeters, you're going to run out of clips to get to that maximum protrusion. So just bear that in mind, or try and start the patient. If you want to start them in a desired, take into consideration what their range of motion is. So taking into account, you only have 5 millimeters of titration, right? It is important to indicate to the lab when you send it to DSG is to say, this is where this is the bite I've provided. It's important for us to know that, because if you've provided, for example, a maximum protrusive bite and you haven't indicated, or you've indicated this is a desired protrusion, well, we're going to manufacture that appliance as a desired protrusive bite in maximum protrusion. So it's very important to indicate which of the 2 bites you've provided. The second part is vertical spacing. So for us to accommodate the appliance, it is one of the lowest profile appliances on the market. So interocclusal space is really, really minimal that we need. We need between 3 and 4 millimeters interocclusal space to make this appliance work. So take that into account when you take your bite. So you have two options here, close or open to optimize the device. If you've, for example, taken the bite and you haven't provided 3 millimeters, or you're not sure whether it's going to be enough space, and you indicate in your prescription, close or open to optimize the bite, what you're saying is, if we see that we don't have enough space, you're going to allow us to open the bite slightly to optimize the space to accommodate those appliances. On the other side, if you've provided a bite that's 5, 6, 7 millimeters open, it's just not going to be comfortable for the patient, and it's not the optimal space that we require for the appliance. So in that case, what we would do is we'd actually close that bite down to accommodate, just enough to accommodate the appliances, but to make the appliances as comfortable as possible for the patient. So by indicating your first option, close or open to optimize the device, you're allowing us to open or close the device without contacting you. On the other side, if you have a specific bite that you've provided and you've opened the bite and you want the patient set in that open bite, you will indicate keep it and call if any major changes are needed. So you're really saying to us, don't change my bite. That's where I want it. That's where that's where I want the patient to be. So don't change it. So indicate it in the second block. Is mandibular protrusion straight? Yes or no? Another very important point. We want to make sure that when we take the bite, that the midline on the upper and lower line up. Now, sometimes the patient has a natural deviation. It is important for us to know, because if there's a deviation on those midlines and it's not a natural deviation and we manufacture the appliance with that bite, what ends up happening is you now have the patient in a deviated position, and because there's very little lateral movement because of the dorsal fins, the patient is now locked in with a deviation. It's going to be very uncomfortable for the patient. So just to indicate whether, if there is a deviation, is there a deviation, yes, or is there no? So is the mandibular protrusion straight, yes or no? It is important for us to know that. For those cases where you want to do the X3, but the patient does have a tendency to open their mouth, we do have the option of putting in elastic notches or elastics. So if you want those put in right from our factory, it's not a problem. Just indicate you want elastic notches, yes or no, indicate that. And then also a very important fact is fragile teeth. Tooth number, indicate the tooth number of a fragile tooth. Crown and bridge or Pontics, also important. Why is this important? The software that we use is very unique, and this is what makes both our Dsad and our X3 so predictable. We are able to control the retention on individual teeth. So if you tell us one of the teeth is sensitive, or this is a Pontic, we obviously don't want to put too much retention on there. We're able to minimize the retention just on those aspects of the teeth or those teeth. So it is important, if there are sensitive teeth or there is crown and bridge work, just indicate that in that section. So if you do want elastics put on your appliances, this is what they look like. So we put little notches in the upper, little notches in the lower. Quite simple for the patient to put the elastics on and off. It's a very, very simple solution for mouth opening. Okay, and then your next step are the optimal values, or the plateaus, excuse me, the plateaus. So as I mentioned previously, the plateau is the contact point between the upper and the lower plate. So it's where the upper and lower meet. And we have two options here. Optimal values, yes or no. So when I choose optimal values, what am I telling Panthera is use the optimal values that are optimized for that specific case. So how much retention do we have? How much undercut do we have? Do we need more rigidity? All these type of factors get taken into account, but you do have the option of customizing. So you have various combinations. On the upper, for example, you have the option contact just in the premolar area. You have on the upper contact just, or a full contact in the upper, or only anterior contact. So if I take, for example, lateral contact, I can combine the lateral contact with lateral on the upper and lateral on the lower, or lateral on the upper, full contact on the lower. it's still only going to give me contact in the premolar area. So what am I doing by giving a lateral contact? I am eliminating any contact in the posterior region, and I'm creating a bit of an airway space in the anterior. So more airflow, more breathing for the patient, and by minimizing the contact in the molar area, I'm taking the strain off the TMJ. So for those bruxing patients, a better solution, better option. A full contact, and I'm going to go through some of the indications, but I can have a full contact on the upper, and full contact just give us more rigidity to the appliance. If we need more rigidity, we need to create a little bit more retention. We can go to a full contact. And of course, then we also have the anterior. We have, so anterior contact, only absolutely no contact on the posterior. So to do this, and we'll have a look at the options, but to do an anterior contact, obviously we can't combine that with a lateral on the lower. We would need to do a full contact on the lower. So we, in that case, we'd only have anterior between upper and lower in the anterior. So some of the indications for these. So when you choose optimal values, it's the standard design. So we're going to have the plateaus are going to be lateral on the upper and full on the lower. What, as you can see, the full, its most common variation, it's minimize pressure on posteriors and minimize stress on TMJ. The anterior opening allows for improved airflow. As I mentioned, because I don't have any contact in the anterior, I've created a small anterior opening, so a little bit of improved airflow for the patient. The lower plateau reinforces the device's rigidity and protects against any lingual movement of lower molars. So for patients who are severe bruxers where there's a lot of lateral movement, the full contact or the full plateau is a better option. It's a more indicated for those patients. A full on full, really just the large surface contact allows for distribution of forces. So we have a better distributed force on the upper and lower, and on teeth that are where we have less undercut or we have very short teeth or mobile teeth, we just want to protect those teeth. We want to prevent them from being dislodged, and we also want to create more rigidity to the appliance. So where we need more retention, we create more rigidity. We have the option of anterior and full. So anterior keeps contact in the anterior only. So for those patients that are severe bruxers where we want to take, we want to protect the TMJ, we have anterior contact only. The anterior contact runs from the 3 to the 3. And so for patients, clenching and bruxers in patient, canine to canine contact. However, bear in mind that the anterior contact can only go in combination with a full lower contact. So it doesn't, for logical reasons, only the full lower contact on the lower. And then we have a lateral on lateral. This really optimizes airflow. Now I have increased even more the anterior opening. This, however, is less indicated for where we need more retention. So when there's enough retention and where we don't need as much rigidity. So they are a little bit more flexible than when we have a full contact. So here you can see we have a full contact. The top right hand, it's a full contact. You can see full contact plateau. And similarly on the left top picture, full contact plateau. So there's contact all the way around. And on the lower picture, you'll see a lateral and lateral. So by creating that lateral, look at that space that we've created in the anterior, just to promote more airflow for the patient. But as you can see, we can combine these. So really it's up to you as a doctor to decide which one is best suited for your patient. So you do have those options. The other component that we look at on the appliance are the bands. So the connectors between the left and the right of the appliance. So again, you'll see there are a wide range of selections. You, again, in this, when you choose the optimal values, you're going to get the optimal and the standard band. So the standard band is going to be a buccal band, and on the lower, it's going to be a lingual with incisal wrap. So half lingual, half buccal, and buccal band. You do also have the option of, but you'll notice that none of these bands make contact with the anterior teeth. So none of our appliances make contact with the anterior teeth. And there's a good reason for that. What we're trying to do is not stop it, but to minimize anterior tooth movement. So there's a very, very small, it's a fraction of, it's a few micron space between the tooth and the appliance. Just enough to prevent it. So if the tooth does move, the appliance will eventually, so the space is there not to put any pressure on those incisors. And it's small enough so that if there is a bit of anterior tooth movement, once it gets to that appliance, it's going to stop that tooth movement. So there is a reason why there's no contact in the anterior of the appliance. And there is an option, however, where you can choose full contact in the anterior region, but you'll notice there's little exclamation marks. The reason is, as I've just explained, there's a reason that we have spaces between those bands and the teeth. So where you do want to have contact, maybe for more stability, we do it, and it can be asked, and you can ask for it, and we will do it. Of course, we're never going to say no, but all we're saying is it's not recommended, and also to indicate that although we have contact in those incisors, we don't take any retention on the incisors. So there is no force applied on those incisors. So there's no interproximal retention taken on the incisors. It's really just the band covering the incisors with contact, but no retention. So just to reiterate, no incisal contact. We take retention on the strongest teeth only, and the bottom line is reduce the risk of tooth movement. No contact, no stress. And that is why you'll see on all these standard designs, there is a space between all the bands on the incisors. So, question gets asked very often, how do I know which band should I? You guys have so many different variations. Which is good for me? Which is good for the patient? So again, we don't dictate which is good for your patient. We do give you the choices though. We can guide you though. So the buccal band, so buccal on the upper, buccal on the lower, allows for maximum tongue space. Obviously, we have no material in the lingual, so we just create more tongue space for the patient. It's not indicated for excessive proclination of incisors for obvious reasons. In that case, we probably recommend that you consider a simple lingual instead. What also has to be noted though is when I only have a lingual upper band or a lingual lower band, there's no rigidity in the appliance. It is very flexible. So it's always good to have either in one or the other, some sort of incisal wrap with a going over the incisors onto either the lingual or the buccal. So, or the second alternative is a full band. So full coverage lingual, full coverage labial. This is when we have missing teeth and we need additional retention. So I did say we don't take retention on the anteriors, but what this full band allows us to do, it provides more rigidity to the appliance. And creating more rigidity allows us to undercut more strength and more strength on the posteriors. And we also need a full coverage when we do a full anterior plateau or contact, right? Because without a full coverage, I cannot do an anterior plateau or I cannot do a full plateau. So we have to have a full coverage. It's also suited when anterior teeth are missing. So just to, again, more rigidity, more stability for the appliance. Then I have the option of a half buckle. So it's a lingual band with incisal wrap and just a half buckle on the upper, and a lingual band, incisal wrap, and half buckle on the lower. This creates more rigidity for the appliance when the retention is low. And the last combination, and say last, but as you can see, you can put them together. But the simple lingual band on the upper, lingual band on the lower. This is when I have excessive proclination of anterior teeth, where the buckle or labial band is not an option. Lingual. Again, it just makes the appliance very, very flexible, and it's not the best for retention. So it's always a good idea to have some sort of rigidity built in. So, for example, a good combination would be to have a buckle band only, and on the lower have a lingual half wrap and buckle over to the labial side. So it creates the rigidity in one of the appliances. So it creates rigidity in the lower, which in turn creates rigidity for the whole appliance. And last but not least, on the prescription, we have a few extra options. So again, these are just preferences. These are things we've put in because we've been asked by doctors, can I, will you? So prefer upper splint distal wrap, which means you want a full distal wrap on the appliance. Some doctors prefer to do it, others prefer to stop short of the distal wrap, but you can indicate yes or do not cover the third molar, upper or lower. Again, just indicate, if you want to stop the appliance halfway across the third molar, that's fine. Just indicate that. Composite buttons, this is something we do less of now, but there was a time when we really lacked retention, and there may be a time when we've tried everything. We have changed the design, we've made it more rigid, we've changed the plateaus, we've changed the bands, and the tooth are just so short and conical, there's absolutely no retention to be achieved anyway. Our last resort, and this really is a last resort, is to add a composite button. So some of you have done aligners, you're familiar with composite buttons, it's the same concept. So adding a composite button, you give us the option, you have the option of add if needed. So if you look at your patient and you think, wow, I think I'm going to have a problem with retention, this is add if needed, or call me. So you have those options. Now, if you put in add if needed, just because we add it to the appliance doesn't mean you have to use it. The facility is there for you to use it if you need it. So the choice really is yours, or you don't have to, or you don't need to ask for it at all. And you can always put the composite, the dimple in yourself at a later stage. So the options are there. So this is just an additional request that you could put in. Any comments you want to do that you want us to know about? And then the last one is, do not call me if design changes are needed. So what happens is when we start going back and forth asking for design changes, it just prolongs the time of your appliance. Every time we need to send an email to contact the lab, what happens is that it's just another day added on. So if you feel that you trust us enough, which I think you should, because we've got enough experience in this and we've got a great success rate with our appliances, is do not call me if you need changes. I mean, we're not going to make changes because we want. We're going to make changes because they're really, really, really are necessary. So in that case, if you indicate to us, do not call me if design changes are needed, just be aware, if you indicate that, you may have asked for a certain design, a certain band, a certain plateau. You may get the appliance back with maybe not exactly what you asked for. And it's not because we want to make you angry, it's just because we just feel that this is probably a better suited appliance for what we have as far as undercut, retention. So the choice really is yours. If you say, no, I really want you to call me and let me know if you change it, then don't mark it. So what do we need from you as a doctor? We need a scan or an impression. We need a scan or impression of a complete dentition. the complete dentition meaning everything. So not just a sectional, we need from the last molar, one arch to the last molar on the other side of the arch. We need impressions or scans beyond the last molar, and we need at least 3 millimeters below the gingival margin of the teeth. These are some of the scenarios that we are faced with on a daily basis, and for very simple reasons. A scan or an impression that is short of the gingival margin, if you look at the design of the appliance, actually goes over this gingival margin by about 2 or 3 millimeters. So we do need you to capture at least 2 or 3 millimeters below that gingival margin. We also need the capture of the last molar. So the capture of the distal of the last molar. The reason we ask for the capture of the distal of the last molar, if we are lacking retention, it's always possible to take the appliance beyond the distal portion of that last molar, and it just helps us create more retention for the appliance. So please, I know it's difficult sometimes, but if you can, please provide us with a full scan or impression beyond the last molar and 3 millimeters at least beyond the gingival margin. And for those of you that have scanners, make sure that you send, it doesn't have to be the highest resolution. Obviously, you don't want the file to get too big, but try and send us at least a good resolution. We do sometimes get resolutions that are really, really low, and it just doesn't give the best quality of the appliance as far as fit goes. So the better quality impression or the better quality scan that you provide, the better the fit and the predictability of the appliance is going to be. What do we recommend? Again, it's a recommendation. We do not prescribe to one or the other type of bite registration tool. What we've found is that the George gauge just works the best for us. Now, are we telling you you have to use it? No, we recommend it. But there are so many different bite registration tools out there. I mean, whatever works for you, use it. As I'd said before, the criteria, what we're looking for is a protrusive bite and an opening of 3 millimeters in the posterior. So, of 3 to 4 millimeters in the posterior. So how you achieve that bite is really up to you. It's just, we recommend the George gauge, but you don't have to stick with it. So optimal bite, we ask for a 4 millimeter desired opening in the molar region. We need about 2 millimeters on the upper, 2 millimeters on the lower. We can go lower, but depending on the patient's curve, I mean, if the patient has an exaggerated curve of Spee, for example, you know, just to accommodate the appliance, we may need to open the bite slightly, but for most of the cases, 4 millimeters, it's enough. And we need it in protrusion, so desired or maximum. Now, this is very important. As I mentioned, for two factors, for two reasons. The one is to indicate desired or max, but also give us we do need a protrusive bite. A lot of times we'll get doctors who send us bites in centric. We cannot go from a centric bite. It's got to be in some sort of protrusion. I would say at least a millimeter or so beyond edge to edge. It just allows you as a clinician to be able to provide that patient with enough titration room. So depending again on their range of motion, if we can go minimum edge to edge, but even better, about a millimeter beyond an edge to edge would be optimal. And just make sure that the bite is stable. When you do a bite scan, a scan bite, make sure that you place the bite in a stable position, that there's no movement from the patient. When we recommend for digital bite taking is use a George gauge, make the patient bite down on both quadrants, cut back the bite material and put the bite material in both quadrants. Make sure that it's even on both quadrants. because we don't want a situation where the bite's canted because they've bitten down harder on one side and then on the other. So make sure that the bite is stable. And that goes for both digital and for analog workflow. So as I mentioned, a bite that we cannot work with is a centric bite, or and we need the bite's just not open enough. It's not possible for us to open the bite accurately on the computer. So make sure that we at least get a 4 millimeter opening in the molar region. So in summary, the CAD/CAM, what are the treatment objectives? So what are the benefits of the nylon appliance, and specifically the X3? Efficacy, it's a CAD/CAM, optimal fitting on first visit. Everything about the appliance, it's predictable. It's CAD designed, it's CAM manufactured. We have full control of how that appliance is going to fit at the end. The other great thing with a CAD/CAM option is replacing an appliance. It's a matter of just pulling up a file. If the patient loses their appliance, there's no need for new impressions, there's no need for new bites. We take the files. If there's no change to the dentition, we take the original files and we manufacture a new appliance for them. And it's going to be as predictable as the first one. We use natural undercut for retention. So no clasps, everything is taken from natural undercut. We have an adjustable, precise, and stable titration. It's a very simple titration, easy to adjust. It's extremely precise. You've seen the little clips. They are in 0.5 millimeter increments. So you know, if I put 2 + 5, you know exactly how much titration you're giving the patient. There's no guessing. And of course, the low profile of this appliance, it just facilitates in bilabial contact. A lot of these appliances, they're very bulky. The patient just has a really hard time closing the lip, getting the lips together. So from a compliance perspective for the patient, just the mere size of the appliance, the fact that the nylon's hydrophobic, there's no discoloration, there is no oral absorption, it doesn't smell like acrylic does. So it's just more pleasure. It's just more pleasurable for the patient to wear it. So what do? We just increase the compliance. So comfort, of course, convenience compared to CPAP. It's extremely easy to handle. So for those of you who prefer to get the patients to change the clips, I mean, again, we don't prescribe how you treat your patients, but it's a really, really easy appliance to work with. So easy to handle for the clinician, easy to handle for the patients. And we have many, many years of proven efficacy in our Dsad. And the X3 is no different. The material is the same, the philosophy is the same, and the efficacy in the X3 is exactly the same. Minimal side effects, minimal tooth movement. So just in the design, the way that the bands are created and produced in the anterior, we talked about no contact in anterior. So we minimize tooth movement. There's minimal articular constraints. Patient has the option to open their mouth. There is in the Dsad a little bit more lateral movement possible, a little less in the X3 because of the dorsal fins. So lateral movement is a little restricted, but there's minimal occlusal impact on the teeth and minimal muscular constraints. Again, because of the nature of the appliance, the fact that it's such a low profile appliance, there's just so little stress on the TMJ. So the warranty on the appliance, it's a 3-year warranty. 3-year warranty on manufacturing defects, compatible with most intraoral scanners. In fact, I don't think there's a scanner yet that we've not been able to work with, but so we're compatible with most intraoral scanners. We do accept both workflows. We accept digital as well as models. So whatever workflow works for you, we're good with that. So it's just a matter of either sending your files to DSG or sending your models and your physical bytes to DSG, and they pretty much take care of the rest. And as far as the care for the appliance goes, it's really, really easy. It's a low maintenance appliance. It doesn't need to be stored in water. We do provide the initial, when we deliver the appliance, the scope of delivery has a little cleaning kit with it. And we do provide a starter pack of what, and I don't know if it's available everywhere, but we do provide a little starter pack of Novodent. And this Novodent really, really brings that appliance right back to its original white color. As soon as there's any little bit of discoloration, put it in the Novodent and it goes, it's like it's new. We have appliances now, we've been at this since 2012, and we have appliances still in patients' mouths, and they still look like new. So these appliances hold up really, really, really well. And with that, I thank you, and I'm open to any questions.
Thanks, Andreas. That was fantastic. It's so great to have the choice of both appliances now. The first question is, if I send a digital file, how do I send the lab prescription?
So,
okay.
Okay, so the as a digital, so right now, DSG has an online prescription. So yes, the doctor would download or fill in the online prescription and scan it and fax it to you, or fax it to you.
Yeah, no, all they have to do is, if it's coming directly, depends on which scanning unit you have. So if it's coming directly from an iTero, they would just use the drop down of DSG, whichever lab they're sending to. And if it's coming from something else, it may involve attaching an STL file. It just depends on which. You'd have to contact your DSG lab, and we'll let you know for sure. We can follow up with that information. Exactly. Yeah. Sure. We accept everything.
Yeah, and you know, Joanne, I think, I mean, you guys are so well equipped with getting information out to the doctors, and I just can't praise you guys enough for what you do. It's quite phenomenal. Such a pleasure working with DSG. It really is. So, I mean, for those of you that want to do an X3, it's just contact your local DSG rep, and they'll provide you with the prescriptions either in a hard copy or available on their website.
Right, and if you can't contact your DSG rep for some reason, you can contact me and I'll put you in touch with them. But we'll send everything in a follow-up for sure. Right. The next question is, if the patient uses a Panthera X3, can he stop using the CPAP?
So I wouldn't recommend stopping any treatment without consulting your physician first. So right. It has been, I mean, of course, oral devices, they do have their limitations as well, where we can go with it. And as far as treatment goes, I would say don't stop anything without consulting your physician first. What I think the physician should do is do a sleep study without the CPAP, just with the oral appliance. And you may find that just the titration on the oral appliance is enough to bring the AHI down enough for the doctor to be happy that they've addressed the situation with an oral appliance. So no, I wouldn't recommend get rid of your CPAP without consulting your physician first.
For sure. Hi, Janice. Cost compared to the Dsad, it's the same. And can we go beyond 5 millimeters?
So no, the 5 millimeters, because of the clips that you get with the appliance, you will not be able to go past 5 millimeters. So however, if you give us a desired protrusion, so if you know the range of motion for the patient, if you know that the patient, let's say, has from edge to edge has 5 millimeters or 6 millimeters range of motion from edge to edge, if you know that you'd like to take them to maximum, then start the patient on a desired protrusion at +1. Now you know that you're going to have enough to get them to maximum protrusion with those 5 millimeters. But no, you cannot go beyond 5 millimeters.
So I have a question. What's the downside of taking a maximum protrusion right from the beginning instead of desired?
there is no benefit or disadvantage. It's just some doctors prefer to take a desired protrusive bite. They just don't like taking a maximum protrusive bite. Although we don't deliver the appliance as a maximum protrusive bite, we do take it back to 60%.
Right.
I think most clinicians are just more comfortable starting their patients at a point where they dictate where the patient is started.
Okay. Do the clips need to be replaced?
No, only when we want to titrate. Other than that, they don't need to be replaced.
What home care instruction is given to the patient to maintain appliance hygiene?
So with every appliance that we deliver, there is a little instruction sheet that goes with each appliance, and it's a 2-page document. It makes for great nighttime reading while you're lying in bed. It explains everything: how to clean it, how to insert it, how to remove it, how to change the clips. So it really is a step-by-step guide. It's a patient information brochure. So everything that they need is in that one brochure.
Yeah, it's a good brochure. What's the process for designing the sleep appliance in areas of missing teeth?
Missing teeth is always a send a case and let's have a look and see where we are with the retention. So the critical thing with missing teeth is, where are those teeth missing? If they're missing on the lower posterior regions, then the X3 is a better indicated appliance than the Dsad, for example. So obviously these appliances are not going to go with edentulous cases, or if we only have anterior teeth where we're missing all the posteriors. But it really is, Joanne, it really is a case by case. I mean, to see once we scan it, we'll know exactly where we need to have retention. But I can tell you that we very, very, very rarely ever have to turn a case down because we don't have any retention. So it really depends on when we scan it, where do we pick up enough? What we may need to do is change the design. So as I've mentioned, the doctor may have one idea of the design in mind, but when we get down to scanning, we may need to change that design. So they just need to be aware when they are missing teeth that the design they've chosen may be a little different,
So
just to accommodate that.
For retention, you would usually go to full coverage.
Exactly. So where a doctor, for example, has maybe chosen just a lingual band or a labial band, we may ask to change it to a full band just to give it a little bit more rigidity.
Yeah. What are the recommendations on how to adjust these appliances at delivery? Example, if they're too tight.
You mean the appliance themselves if they're too tight?
Yes.
So there are ways of, the way that we take retention on these appliances on the undercuts of the teeth. So to minimize retention slightly is to take a little carbide burr and just remove a little bit at a time, because bear in mind, you cannot add to this material. So don't take away too much. Just to relieve slightly interproximally to see where it is tight, put it back on the model, just have a look and see where it's tight, and just relieve slightly interproximally and take a little bit of the bulbous effect out of the undercuts.
Okay. And what is the cost and how much time in lab? So that's more of a lab question. Jessica, can we get Julie Zerby to chime in if she's still on? I think, yeah.
Yes, let me see. I know cost because it's an educational space.
Yeah. So you know what, we're gonna we'll follow up because of our, because of your PACE points, your AGD points. We're not supposed to talk about pricing and things. So
but I did click on Julie Zerby and allowed her to talk. If she wants to unmute, you can talk about time in lab.
That's in the States. Yeah.
Yes, this would be in the USA.
US. In Canada, it's 3-week turnaround time, 21 days, sometimes shorter. And yeah, and we'll find out in the States.
So yes, so in Canada, we are saying 3 weeks, but I can tell you that it's less than 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's less than 3 weeks.
I'm not seeing that she can come off mute. So,
okay, we'll follow up with you and let you know, Dr. Kaplan. And so does anyone have any other questions? I'm just going to check the chat here because I thought I saw some questions. Yes. What is the process for design? Oh, someone changed. Okay, no, that's it. Any other questions?
I think Dr. Kaplan raised his hand again, so I'm gonna ask him to unmute. If you'd like to, there we go. You are unmuted, Dr. Kaplan, and so are you, Julie Zerbe.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Julie.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Dr. Kaplan, what was your question?
He was asking about turnaround time and cost.
So typical turnaround time is about 15 days. So once you send it to me, it's about 15 days. We immediately send the scans to Panthera, and it takes about 15 days for me to get it back to you.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Well,
Anything
thank you.
else you want to add in tonight, Julie?
No, I appreciate it. This was really great. I appreciate having this one.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming on board.
Thank you so much, Andreas. As usual, a great presentation. And we will be sending follow-up with all the relevant information to you. Just give us a day or two and you will get your continuing education certificates as well. Thank you very much. Jessica?
Yes, thank you for joining tonight. Thank you, Joanne, and thank you, Andreas. Especially, we're so excited for this product to come out to market and really learn the science behind it. So thank you, audience, for joining us this evening. And until then, we wish you a very restful evening, some great learning, and we look forward to learning with you again in the future. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.